Hey, how's it going, guys? Back for another episode of Off the Pitch, and today we'll be talking about the FA Cup final, the race for the top spot in League One, and some of the hottest transfers in the world of football, and a little bit more right after this. Well, we're going to start off with talking about the 2021 FA Cup final between Leicester City and Chelsea. Leicester have won their first ever FA Cup 1-0 with a Yuri Tielemans screamer. Your club is sadly taking a loss here. What did you make of this game for your team in the final?
Well, before I get to talking about me being sad about the result and the beautiful world of VAR, full credit to Leicester and their performance in this game. And, of course, as you mentioned, a beautiful goal and a great screamer from Yuri Tielemans, a well-deserved goal. It was a poor play out of the back for Rich James, and lots of Chelsea fans will argue whether there was a handball there or not. Ultimately, that pass just needs to be better, and the defensive positioning wasn't there to recover, and ultimately just a great shot. A well-deserved goal from Leicester and a well-deserved win. They played very well, as much as you can say. They played defensively once they got that goal. They did their job well. They held their lead, and they got a good win out of it. But, of course, we have to talk about the VAR decision. It seems way too regularly that VAR needs to be discussed, but it really comes to the forefront when you have such a vital decision in such an important game that decides a domestic trophy. And of course, yes, you look at VAR and he was offside. There's no doubt about it by VAR. But it's frustrating when that's the use of VAR, at least in my opinion. When VAR was introduced, my thought with VAR was that, okay, as it was kind of used in the World Cup back however many years ago, is we're going to use VAR for a clear and obvious decision that needs to be recalled. And that makes sense. If a call is visibly made as a mistake and it's a penalty or it's a handball or it's a foul that drastically changes the game and was very egregious and noticeable and it was missed, then that makes sense. But to be making these toenail, hairline offside calls, it just ruins the flow of the game. It ruins the excitement. And part of it's a VAR issue, and part of it's maybe just an actual law of the game issue, whether that means VAR gets changed to being we deal with only things that are very egregious and very noticeable and not these little distinguishable things like in American sports. If it is something that is very obvious that it can be overturned, it'll be overturned. But if it's very tight on the line and it's not an 100% thing by the naked eye, then it doesn't get overturned. Or maybe it needs an adjustment of maybe the rule just isn't up to date. Maybe it should be a half a stride length, but whatever the rule is adjusted to, as opposed to just if your toenail isn't behind the other defender, then you're offside. So I definitely think there's some changes that need to be made with this, not necessarily from an increase in the attacking standpoint, but just from an enjoyment of the game standpoint. I mean, me for myself, that goal went in, and here we are late in the FA Cup, we equalize, and as all Chelsea fans were, especially in the stadium. And then to just see a call like that come back on a goal, nobody wants to see that on your own side. And of course, Leicester fans loved it, but if you flip the script, no one likes it. And so I think some changes definitely need to be made. What changes get made is a whole other story. But I think there's some issues with the current system, with a collection of VAR and the laws of the game as far as the offside rule.
Yeah, VAR definitely played a huge part in this game. As it's a beautiful ball to show well. It looked like he timed his run well, but it was a toenail, maybe a hair over. And the part that really matters is feet were in line with whoever the defender was over there. I can't remember who was defending him, but they were in line. I think it was his shoulder or whatever that was off. But I think VAR needs to look at how they make the calls, and it's got to be clear and obvious error, which it was supposed to be, which hasn't happened at all. And they got to go back and maybe they got to change it to where the foot starts or where the foot is behind the line. I don't know. They've got to really look at this because it's really killing some of the game. But from both teams, it was really not their best performance at all. Leicester were not really great at all, and Chelsea didn't perform as we expected on the big stage. And it seems like when Chelsea go down a goal, it seems like they don't have the fight, the passion to come back, or maybe it's the setup, the system. What do you think of your team's setup? And when you guys go down a goal, do you feel like it's over? What do you feel like?
They're definitely very much tailored to a defensive system right now under Tuchel. Of course, we've gotten so many clean sheets and so many good defensive performances under Thomas Tuchel. But the attack definitely hasn't necessarily raised the level. Now, some of that's mentality and some of that's just the quality of the players on the pitch. But I think it's just also a combination of the system. There's still a lot of crosses that goes on in this system, which is fine and dandy when you have Tammy Abraham or Giroud up top. But when we're sitting up there with Timo Werner at striker and we're trying to whip balls in, it's just not a recipe for success. And especially against a team against Leicester. We know that Timo Werner struggled to finish this year, and he still brings so much more off the pitch with his press and his energy and his pacing behind. But in a game against Leicester, especially once you go down a goal 1-0, Timo Werner just isn't going to offer that for you out there. He's not going to be able to get in behind the defense. Those opportunities just aren't going to be there. And so I think part of that was a personnel choice that just probably wasn't best fit for the match. If you're playing a team that's holding the ball a bit more and getting up the pitch, like Manchester City, I understand getting Timo Werner in there. But even if you wanted someone like the likes of Kai Havertz, who has a bit more of an aerial presence, who has a bit more size, it would have made a bit more sense. And also, the Chelsea attack just doesn't look the same without Christian Pulisic in there. His speed and his ability on the ball to beat players one-on-one, and even Callum Hudson-Odoi to a lesser extent, who hasn't really seen the pitch that much lately for Chelsea. They just have ability on the ball that no one else on the Chelsea side really has. Mason Mount, of course, is very creative, but he doesn't have that breakaway speed as those types of players do. And so I think the player selection from Tuchel on the day definitely has to be questioned. Alonso also looked very poor out on the left-hand side. Now, he hasn't played in a while, but his lack of pace, it always struggles. But even as he gets later on in his career, it just becomes more and more noticeable, especially against a team where in Leicester you're trying to get out on the counter-attack, and Alonso's just not getting back in that scenario. He never will. And so it's a combination of quality, and it's a combination of choice selection from Tuchel, and hopefully he can make the right decisions moving forward with two crucial games ahead with Leicester, which will very much determine the fates of top four for those two teams, and of course the Champions League final against Manchester City.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a mix of system and the passion and belief in some of the players. When you guys go down by a goal, it just looks like you're not coming back. The attack doesn't look like it's there. It's cohesive enough. But really, I got to look at Leicester. Leicester were phenomenal on the day. They didn't really play up to their standards. Leicester a lot better than this. I got to give Brendan Rodgers a lot of praise. I think he's the best English manager out there right now, one of the best we will ever see. He's done fantastic with them. We've known Brendan Rodgers really be a bottle job going into the season with Liverpool with the Gerrard slip, and he never really won it at Liverpool. Won many titles at Celtic, but that is expected when you're at Celtic. Comes to Leicester, fell to the Champions League last year, and now he looks like he could have them in Champions League this year. But he has won silverware, which keeps them going on their magical dream in Leicester. Before we end this talk about this game, I want to talk about why Tammy Abraham was completely left out of the squad. The club's top leading goal scorer this year. He can score in the air. He is beautiful running in behind. He has nous for finishing. Why do you think he was left out of the squad, and do you think he'll be transferred out this summer?
It's been unfortunate to not see him in the team lately. He knows how to put the ball in the back of the net. Now, there's definitely some weaknesses with this game, and specifically in the system we've been playing a bit lately, where you'll have Mount or Pulisic or Ziyech in a bit more in and around the striker. Those three positions become a bit more interchangeable, and Tammy isn't someone you're exactly going to see interchanging in a front three, someone who's going to drift out wide a bit more. And so I think that system just doesn't really fit him, unfortunately. But he's someone who just knows how to put the ball in the back of the net. Now, at his size, his physicality, and his presence in the air definitely does need improvements. His hold-up play has definitely seen improvement, but it definitely is still something that needs to work on for someone of his size. And I think he can still continue to just put on some more muscle to develop in that part of his game. But ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised to see him be transferred out this summer, because he's definitely a quality Premier League striker. And if Tuchel and members within Chelsea don't want to see him for the long-term future, then fair enough. Is he a number 9 for Chelsea long-term on a title contending team for Chelsea? Probably not. He might be a backup, but that just doesn't seem to be the way it's going to pan out right now. And so I think there's no reason why we couldn't see him on a mid-table side in the Premier League as a guy who can put in 10, 15 goals a season in the Premier League quite comfortably. I think he definitely has the ability for that, and even more so as he continues to develop moving forward.
Yeah, Tammy Abraham, it's odd he's been left out, but he obviously doesn't fit the system that Tuchel wants to play. He's obviously a quality English striker. Everyone looks for that English striker, that English quota. And I think he'll definitely move on this summer, hopefully to the likes of Leicester, maybe a West Ham, because he would definitely be good at a top team and a top European side. Before we leave England and stop talking about England, we're going to move to the Liverpool and West Brom game. This game wasn't really talked about. It was talked about all over the weekend, but not for the likes that you might think. Liverpool really didn't look like they were up to it. Shaqiri was brought on late in the game to come out and win the game for them, be that X factor. Shaqiri came on and did absolutely nothing. I watched the game. It was pretty boring. Liverpool were kept at bay all game by West Brom, defended fantastically, as you expect from a Big Sam side. And then 95th minute, 5 seconds left, Alisson comes up for a header on the corner, and Alisson scores the winning goal. And nobody would have expected this. And Thiago even said after the game, he's played with big players, played with top players, but the execution on the header was better than anything he's ever seen before. What did you make of this game, and what did you make of Alisson scoring a game-winning header to probably get them into the Champions League?
I mean, as you say, this is a massive win for their top 4 chances. Of course, Chelsea and Leicester play here now on Tuesday, and so there's going to be drop points from one or two of those sides either way, and so Liverpool are in a very good chance to jump into that top 4 over Chelsea or Leicester. And I mean, it's just an absolute shocker that you see Alisson come up and get this winning header for them, an absolute decisive goal for the success of their season and be able to get top 4. And I thought this game was well and over. It was 1-1. And sure enough, I checked the score later, and I see that it's 2-1, and I see the likes of Alisson has scored a goal, and I was just absolutely shocked. It was a brilliant goal, to be fair, by Alisson, absolutely brilliant. It'd be a brilliant goal by the standards of anyone, never mind a goalkeeper who plays with his feet and makes saves, and to come out and score a goal like that in such an important moment. He's already so valuable for this team. To come in and do something of this caliber is just so valuable, and something that will definitely be remembered for a long time.
Yeah, it's amazing to see another goalie score. We've seen like Tim Howard score and many other goalies before him, but to keep his team in the Champions League and probably clinch the Champions League spot now, like you were saying, is unbelievable. And for him to score a goal like that after his father passed away a couple of weeks ago and to dedicate that to his father is huge for him, and it's emotional. And like he said, his father's been with him and playing football with him ever since he was a kid, and it's great to see him score that from his dad. And you'd never expect a goalkeeper to do that and debut for that for his father. And we're going to move out of England just for the last couple minutes before we head out a break, and we're going to go to the Ligue 1 in France. This weekend we saw PSG win 4-0 against Reims, and Los Lille have tied 0-0 against Saint-Etienne. And that means Los Lille are only 1 point in first ahead of PSG with 80 points and PSG on 79 points, which comes down to the last game of the season, and it's 1 point between the two. What do you think is going to happen here going to the last game of the season?
I think Los Lille still have to be considered the favorites. They've obviously been playing very good football throughout the season. They don't have a very difficult opponent. They are going to be playing Angers in their last game of the season, who aren't exactly a star-studded opponent. They are in 12th for a reason. They have lost 3 games in a row. They're not exactly on a hot run of form. Now, I would expect PSG to win. They have played Stade Brestois, which also was not a great opponent. But Lille has still been playing well. Saint-Etienne is not a terrible squad, and they controlled a large portion of this game. And so I would expect that they can get a win in against Angers and get themselves a title. I really hope that is the case. I would love to see a different winner out in France. And on top of that, we also see Monaco and Lyon will be fighting for that 3rd Champions League spot as well. So lots to be decided out in France this weekend. It's going to be a very fun weekend of football to see how that finishes up.
Yeah, we saw an exciting weekend in the Turkish league, which saw 2 teams finish on same goal, just one on goal differential by 1 goal, and we could possibly see that in Ligue 1, which we would hate to see it a draw and a loss here, but it would be interesting to see it go down. And it is all in the balance really here. We saw it in Turkish league, like I said, but both it's in Los Lille's hands. A win and they win it, a draw and anyone's game. Stade Brestois and Angers are really going to probably fight their heart out to give one of these teams a win. And who knows, maybe Angers could have a shock and give it to Los Lille. Maybe they don't want PSG to win it, which it could be likely, really. PSG have won it many years in a row. I don't want to talk about anyone persuading the game, but you never know when PSG have won it so many years and people in that country are getting really fed up. But for a young team like Los Lille, this is absolutely unbelievable for them to pull this kind of a feat off and really routed over PSG. And to see a Canadian like Jonathan David go all the way with Los Lille and take over first place is unbelievable. To get that Canadian experience and some Canadian leadership now with Davies is truly fantastic for our national team. Hopefully it can continue for us. But we're going to move on to the next segment of our show and Off the Pitch, where we talk about the transfer roundup of this week. We'll be right back right after this. There's been many transfers this week. Fabrizio Romano has been busy tweeting nonstop this week, and we're going to start it off with 3 Brazilian names. We're going to start off really with Douglas Costa from Juventus, and he is almost 100% going to Grêmio back in Brazil. The 30-year-old Brazilian has been in contact with them for about a week now. He's been talked with European sides. He's obviously still a fantastic footballer. 30 years old, he can still play for a couple more years in Europe for a top club, Europa League club even. Do you see this one 100% going through, and what do you make of this transfer?
It definitely makes sense to me that some of the quality of Douglas Costa, obviously not at the same caliber as he has been in previous years, but still a quality player, as you mentioned, someone who could definitely still play for a quality side in Europe. But I definitely understand someone who is, of course, of Douglas Costa being Brazilian, wanted to go back home and play for Grêmio. There could be family implications, of course. It definitely makes a lot more sense than the Florian Sylvain transfer we were talking about last week. It seems to be the trend of wingers in their prime, at least from an age perspective, coming back over to the Americas. But at least from the case of Douglas Costa, this one at least makes sense. I can definitely see this one going through and seeing him land in Grêmio.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree with you more here. This one makes complete sense. A guy, Brazilian, going home. He could still play for his national team. We saw Dani Alves earlier today get called back up, which makes no sense to me. He's 38, playing right back. But Douglas Costa going home to play for Grêmio. We could see Grêmio become a giant once again. I can't really comment where they are in the Brazilian league. I am not really the expert right there, I'll admit myself. But we see 2 more Brazilians move on to here. David Luiz and Willian from Arsenal are set to leave the club. Kroenke has announced that this week. And many Arsenal fans might be happy about this. 2 aging ex-Chelsea players who have joined Arsenal, both 32, 33, around that age. They could go back to Grêmio maybe with Douglas Costa. Willian was talked about going to Inter Miami last year. Where do you see these 2 ending up? Do you think they'll go back home to Brazil, or do you think they'll stay with a top club in Europe?
Before I comment on that, I'll just mention Grêmio were 4th in the table last season, and so it's definitely a good addition for them. They were 25 points off the title with Flamengo winning it, so it's definitely a good addition for them if they can get him to try and push their way up the table towards that top half. But as far as Willian and David Luiz go, they definitely still have some quality, although they've definitely dropped off with the last couple of years. I mean, Willian's always been a hot and cold player, especially in his years with Chelsea. He has moments where he's just brilliant and he looks like one of the best attackers in the world. And then we have other times where he's just making poor plays. He looks lethargic. He has no effort. His defensive energy isn't there. And then you could arguably say the same about David Luiz. He's obviously an amazing ball-playing center back, someone you could argue who probably could have been a DM for as good of a ball-playing player as he is. But he definitely has some moments where he just makes some very poor decisions. His effort isn't there. He can be a good leader at times, but his pace is just not where it used to be anymore either. I still think they can both offer something to European clubs, but I don't necessarily think they're the caliber of player for a top European club anymore. And so with that being said, I think it is more likely we see them making a move back home to Brazil, or if they have any interest in playing in the MLS or something of that sort, because I don't see these players playing in Europe if they're not playing for a team that's fighting for European competition, and I just don't quite think they're at that level of play anymore.
Yeah, they're obviously a bit behind the pace. We saw that especially with Willian. David Luiz maybe could still stay at a top club, but Willian is obviously way behind the pace. I can't exactly say his goals, just his contribution this year, but it's been god-awful. I remember him getting compared to the likes of Daniel James, and James was doing terrible at the start of the season too. But yeah, David Luiz definitely could stay in Europe, I think. I can't see him going to MLS quite yet, unless he wants to chase the money. I don't think too many teams could really do that with designated player rule. I could see Willian maybe going to Inter Miami, but that's going to be kind of touchy with David Beckham working the books and already trouble with the designated player rule, like I said, bringing like the Matuidi, Higuain. They're in a tough spot. But I could see Willian going to MLS. That could be very possible. He seems like a guy who's chasing the money, which he has at Arsenal. But they could easily both go back home to Brazil. And we'll quickly move on here to Memphis Depay. Memphis Depay has obviously been talked about going to Barcelona quite a bit. His contract's running out with Lyon this summer. Lyon obviously have a chance to clinch Champions League. But Depay came out with this message earlier today, and he said, "It is time for me to take control of my career, as I have come to a point where I need to make important choices about my future. I've decided to negotiate my future deals together with my team of trusted confidence, backed by legal experts. I will decide about my designation myself. You will be the first to know." what does that really hint to you? Do you think he's going to be staying at Lyon or Barcelona?
Well, I think he's definitely out the door, and I don't think that should be too much of a surprise to anyone. It looked like he was going to potentially move last summer, and then things fell through. Barcelona obviously, of course, had some very large financial issues. And along with that, I mean, Fabrizio Romano, as of recording this, has tweeted 9 minutes ago, Barcelona are now negotiating directly with Memphis Depay. It won't be a long-term contract, however, it'll only be 2 or 3 years. And so I think it's definitely likely we see him in a Barcelona jersey sooner rather than later. I don't know how the fit works here, especially if Aguero comes in. You're going to have Aguero, Messi, Memphis Depay, Ansu Fati. There's just a lot of quality and a lot of different players on this team. I don't know if he is a starter on this team. It definitely makes sense for him to get out of Los Gleil. He's definitely revived and grown his confidence in his career back in Los Gleil after having a rough time in the Premier League with Manchester United. And he's done very well. He's been very dominant in the league, and it definitely makes sense that he wants to move on. I don't quite know if Barca is the best fit. I feel like Barca, again, might just be that move where it's just a bit too big for him. He might not see the success with the playing time that he wishes for, but I think it's definitely likely that we see him in a Barcelona jersey.
Yeah, I think that's almost 99% certain for almost everyone in the footballing world right now. Even when you're ringing out attackers' names, you still forgot the likes of Ousmane Dembele and Pedri too, which just shows how many players they have up front in abundance. But I think Ousmane Dembele will leave. But besides the point, you're looking at Griezmann, Aguero, Dembele, Messi, Depay, Pedri, Ansu. The list is just stupidly long. And the fact that they're going to be trying to fit all these guys in makes no sense to me. I don't know why Aguero and Depay would be going there. Like, we could talk about Aguero quickly. Aguero's agreed personal terms this week. It's been confirmed by multiple sources this week. Fabrizio's confirmed it a little bit, but it's more so been your Sky Sports, your Sport Bible, whatnot, those kinds of sources. I don't understand why you're bringing in the likes of Aguero and Depay. It really seems weird because I don't see Aguero being a Ronald Koeman signing. I see him being a Xavi signing if he gets signed as manager. I see Depay being a Ronald Koeman signing. So I think these kind of clash, and you already have a lot of forwards already, so I don't understand how either of these work. Quickly, what do you think about Sergio Aguero before we move to a couple of the other players?
Yeah, it's a weird one to beat, too, for sure. Antoine Griezmann, of course, has played much better as of late, and Ansu Fati is there, and he's got to get playing time. And this is not to mention Depay comes in, Aguero comes in. Just those five in themselves cause problems. And then you throw in the like of Ousmane Dembele if he stays, and Pedri. It just doesn't make sense. If they want to start bringing in younger talent to support things when Griezmann leaves and more soon at a sooner rate when Messi leaves, then that makes a bit more sense. But to bring in someone like Aguero, that's a short-term fit, a short-term plug-in, and hope to get some success. And I don't know if he even starts for them, or should start for them at least, with the play of Antoine Griezmann and Messi, and then depending on if they want to start Ansu Fati or Depay, or what they want to do on that left-hand side. But it just seems like a really weird fit to me.
Yeah, it's a very odd and confusing what Barcelona are doing here. They've started to move young, and they're going back a bit older with Aguero and Depay and Griezmann and Messi. But it'll be interesting to see what they do next year. It's been a good year for them this year, a lot better than I expected. But we're going to move to the other side of Spain, to Real Madrid, where Zinedine Zidane is basically about to leave this summer. He's told the squad he is going to leave, and Barcelona are kind of scrambling here for a new manager. Maximiliano Allegri, an ex-Juventus manager, has been contacted about the job. He rejected it a couple of years ago before Zidane came back, and now Florentino Perez is in a difficult spot to see who's going to take the job. Do you think Allegri is the right man, or do you think he'll take the job, and you think Zidane will walk?
I don't think he's necessarily the wrong guy for the job. I just think it's going to be hard to replace someone of the quality as Zinedine Zidane. He's been such a good manager for the club, even though he's received a lot of criticism over the years. I mean, the success that he's had there is just, it's factual, it's evident, it's been shown, and you can say he's been carried by the players, he's been carried by the team. But you can look in other scenarios where you can say, this team is really good, you just should be winning with them. And then we've seen managers leave and struggle. We've seen that with the likes of Juventus this year, where arguably their team is weaker this season, but under a new, unexperienced manager in comparison to Sarri last year, they just have not performed as well. And so some credit still has to go to the managers when dealing with very talented teams. Part of those talented teams is just being able to manage egos and keeping everyone happy, and I think that's a very underrated part of some of these positions. And so I think it's going to be tough to replace him. Allegri might be a decent signing, and I think he could definitely do the job at a decently well position. But it's going to be tough to replace that quality of Zinedine Zidane at the club, and I think they're definitely going to see a drop off in quality whenever he does leave, if this is the summer he does go.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's downplayed how good he really is, Zinedine Zidane. Like you said, the egos he has to deal with, like the Benzema, Hazard, so many different players, Ramos, Varane, Modric, Cruz, Casemiro, the age you have in that team too. And he hasn't really been given the youth to kind of transition as Barca had with their academy, with the likes of Pedri, Ansu Fati, Araujo, Frankie de Jong. Barcelona is oozing with young talent, but Zidane has had nothing to work with at all. He's had Rodrigo, who got brought in, he's been okay. And you've had Vinicius Jr., who's been just god awful most of the time. You have Benzema telling his players not to pass to him because he feels like Vinicius is against them. But the talent they have there, besides Ferland Mendy, and that's it. And you're signing David Alaba in the summer, who's still very old for the likes of a center back. Zinedine Zidane, I don't blame him for walking. He's not getting given the youth. He's not been given the talent. If he wanted, he could request Odegaard back, but I don't think Odegaard really wants to come back, the likes of it. But it's very odd for what Real Madrid are doing. They haven't really backed him. And it's going to be very interesting to see if Zidane wants to go somewhere else or if he's just going to retire as a football manager. Because obviously Madrid was his club, and I'd be interested to see if he goes anywhere else. But I do think Allegri would be a good choice, but I think it'd be hard for him to manage all the egos. It is a tough choice because we're not the kind of likes of a legend as Zidane was at Real Madrid. We're going to quickly move out of Spain and La Liga, and we're going to jump all the way to Italy. And we're going to talk about Locatelli, who is going to be joining either Juventus or PSG or any sorts of club. It sounds like he's going to go to a big club this summer. A fantastic Italian defensive midfielder. Could follow in the likes of Verratti's footsteps, go to PSG, or could go to Juventus or Inter Milan, one of the big clubs in Italy. Fantastic midfielder. I would love him at my club, Manchester United. I love him anywhere. He looks brilliant. What do you think about Locatelli, and where do you think he might end up?
Yeah, I think he's a brilliant center defensive midfielder. I think he's definitely one of the center defensive midfielders of the future on the world stage, someone we could see being one of the best in the world as he continues to develop down the line. The likes of City, PSG, and Juventus seems to be the clubs that are the most interested in him and most likely to acquire him at this point in time. And I think that just speaks to his quality. It is some of the top premier clubs in the world that are interested in him, and there's a reason for that. He is a quality center defensive midfielder. And I think whoever gets him is going to gain a solid piece of their midfield for a very long time to come. I think it's going to bring very good stability in that midfield, a good defensive play, an ability to get you out of the back with his passing ability as well. I think there's a lot to like about Locatelli. I don't think it's a given he stays in Italy. Maybe the likes of Milan or Inter will show a play, but I think it's going to be the big clubs that are chasing him, and I think he definitely could end up leaving Italy as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're only looking at the big clubs here coming in for Locatelli. And before we round up this transfer segment for this week, there's many transfers, but we're going to end it off with a big one on Erling Haaland, the Norwegian superstar, the world talent, the next Ballon d'Or winner. He is likely to stay, according to the owner from Borussia Dortmund, because they have now qualified for the Champions League. And it sounds like they're not going to let go of him. Do you think that's the right move for Haaland's career, or do you think he should leave?
It's hard to say whether this is Dortmund actually saying they don't want to sell him, or this is just a tactic to get another $20 million out of someone like the likes of Man City or whoever tries to buy him, and just be like, hey, we're in the Champions League, and give us the money. I don't know exactly where this is going to go yet, and I don't think they're exactly going to be like, oh, we have to sell him. But if someone offers $150 million, I don't think they're exactly going to be in a position where they say, no, we'll wait till next year, because there's just no guarantee you're going to get that again. Now, you might get more, but how much more are you really going to get than $150 million for him? So if he's going to go, and I think at this point it's just kind of a position where they're just trying to get as much money as they can for their player as they should. And so he definitely could stay, but I don't exactly expect him to be on this team come next year. I expect he does get moved this summer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think Mino Raiola, his agent, as we know, is footballing intrigued to watch him work his business. Mino Raiola with Pogba, De Ligt, all of his clients. He's always a difficult one to work with, but I think him and Haaland will be going on a European tour around the clubs this summer, especially if Norway not being in the Euros. I think that's the perfect opportunity for him just to walk around Europe and try to get as much money as he possibly can for his client in Erling Haaland. It's going to be an interesting summer with a lot of signings so far, as we talked about for the past couple of weeks. Haaland looking like a massive one. Who knows where he might land? City, United, PSG, Barcelona. It's going to be an interesting one. We'll be back with some of the hot topics and hot events in the world of football right after this. Well, we're back once again, and there is a lot going on in the world of football after the transfers, and Harry Kane is kind of like a transfer, but he is requested to leave Tottenham Hotspurs today via Sky Sports. And do you think he's going to go, and where would you think he would end up?
Well, it's definitely not the first time we've seen Harry Kane be disgruntled with Spurs, their lack of spending, or being able to support the squad, and being able to develop a winning team around him and being able to have that success. Is it going to be different this time? I don't really know. Like, it's been a scenario for the last couple of years now where it's been quite visible and quite known that Harry Kane doesn't necessarily want to be at Spurs in the long run, and Spurs just haven't been able to get any better run of success. If anything, they've arguably gotten worse as the years have gone on, as other teams around them have gotten better. But there is an air of it being a bit different this time. I don't think Harry Kane has ever come out this vocally to the media and said that he wants out, and he is very disgruntled and unimpressed with how things are going in Spurs right now. And so I think more so than in the last couple of summers, it is a bit more likely that we see Kane move from Spurs rather. I think he stays within the Premier League. If he does, I think the likes of Manchester City and Manchester United are the favorites to get him. I don't think he's going to move across London to Chelsea as much as that's been talked about. It just doesn't seem likely to me. But with that being said, if Spurs do lose Kane, the level of Spurs it's just a whole other level down. Forget joking about them making trophies. Them just making the Europa League is going to be a challenge every year. They won't be far off just a mid-table club at that point unless they can make a serious signing to replace him. What he brings to that team is just way above anybody else on that roster, and I think they're really going to struggle without him if he does leave.
Yeah, I think if Harry Kane goes, I think he's going to, like you said, like some Manchester clubs, Manchester United, Manchester City. As a United fan, I really hope we don't get him, because that means we're going to be spending anywhere from $150 million to $175 million probably, or even more with the likes of his talent and his age. But you could also see him go to Paris Saint-Germain and link up back with Mauricio Pochettino. I think that's only likely if we see Kylian Mbappe leave and go to Real Madrid, which is very, very likely this summer, which would be interesting to see that happen. But I think you're right. I think Harry Kane does stay in the Premier League, and I think he does stay in Manchester. I hope he doesn't go to United or City, because the league is over if he goes to City. I don't think we see City lose it for the next 5-6 years if he goes to City, because I think that team is already unbelievable to win it without a striker this year. And to bring in the best striker in the world, Harry Kane, is just absolutely ridiculous. But I don't think City's going to splash that kind of cash. We've never seen them spend more than $80 million on a player. Like Ruben Diaz is their highest signing. But Manchester United, I don't think he'll go to us either, unless that's what the Glazers are planning on, to bring that big name to win back the fans and stop the protesting. But I hope that's not who we bring in. I don't know. He could be dealt really anywhere but it's really about fee. Chelsea could go in on it. Roman Abramovich is known to splash some cash, bring in the big signing. But it all depends what fits Thomas Tuchel's system. But like you said, Tottenham, if they lose Harry Kane, they're really nothing. I think they fall 10th, even farther down the table. They'll be one of the Arsenals, but Arsenal has positives about them, and I don't see Tottenham coming back without Harry Kane. I see Sonny leaving if Harry Kane goes, but Son does love London, but I don't think he loves London that much to lose Harry Kane, because that even you can see right now they lost their manager and Jose Mourinho, but Ryan Mason ain't going to cut it, and obviously nobody else wants to go there right now, and that just shows you that they're not a top club. So it's very interesting to see that Harry Kane has formally come out requesting to leave, because he's never yet done that being in Tottenham, because he doesn't want to wreck his relationship with the fans. But I'm kind of glad he has, because it's due time that he gets out of there and goes and wins a future trophies, because he deserves it to be named one of England's best ever strikers. But one of our last topics before we wrap up the show today will be significant players and notable players left out of Euro squads, mostly because of injuries, but some are no call-ups. We're going to start with Sweden and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who came out of retirement just to come back to play for Sweden. What do you make of this, and do you think it was right to come back out of retirement?
It's got to be really disappointing from Sweden fans and Zlatan to have him finally come out of retirement now, and then right before his first major competition with the team, he ends up picking an injury that now he won't be able to play in the tournament. It's really unfortunate. It definitely hurt Sweden's odds in the Euros. Not that you necessarily would have considered them a contender, but it definitely could have been a team that could have made a surprise deeper run than most would have expected. And now without Zlatan, that's obviously going to hurt their chances a lot. They still have a quality side. But it's just not going to be the same without Zlatan. He still brings such a good attacking presence and just an ability to finish goals and score in that area that just is unrivaled on that Sweden roster, as it is for most rosters. And I think it's really unfortunate for Zlatan, and it's really unfortunate for the Sweden squad.
Yeah, first of all, I think he was wrong to come back out of retirement. I think he could have came back out, but I think Sweden were wrong to take him. Yes, he's sitting there on the table. It's Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He's the king and god of football. But I think he left Sweden in such a harsh and wrong way. I think Sweden should have said, sorry, you were rude to us. You left us in the wind, and we don't want you back. But they took him back. And I think with him, they might have had a chance. But now they have literally zero chance at all unless they're going to play completely bar-to-bus football. But it is unfortunate for Zlatan Ibrahimovic to have another knee injury. It didn't look so significant. We talked about it last week. And this week it obviously has changed, and he will no longer feature in the Euros for Sweden, which really hurts their odds. We will move on to a Dutch player, a center back, and everyone knows this has already happened. Virgil Van Dijk said on Liverpool's website he will no longer be taking part in the 2020 Euros for the Dutch national side because of his injury that's been with him since the Pickford Challenge back from the start of the Premier League season. Do you think it was the right call for him, or do you think he should have bucked up and played?
I think it definitely makes sense. At his age, at his point in time in his career, he still has so many years ahead of him. It just doesn't make sense to risk an injury, especially with such a serious injury, potentially re-injuring that, and risking such a longer injury, being out for a longer extended time, potentially missing another season. It just doesn't make sense. As much as you want to be there for your country and help your team succeed, especially in such a big competition like the Euros, it just doesn't make sense from a personal standpoint or from a long-term career standpoint, from a family standpoint. It doesn't make sense from any standpoint, realistically, to risk that injury other than the fact of I love my country and I want to be there. But ultimately, if he's not healthy and he's not fit, it's not worth it. They have other players that can fill that role, and hopefully he can be ready to go for the next time around for Netherlands' next major competition. It just makes sense for him to get back healthy and back on the pitch 100% for Liverpool come the fall.
Yeah, I'm sure his family, his agent, and Liverpool backroom staff has obviously convinced him to stay back from the Euros, heal up, rest up for the next Liverpool season, because obviously Liverpool need him. We've seen it this year. The back line was god-awful. And I obviously hate Liverpool, but I do understand he is the best center back in the world, and everyone wants to see him back playing once again. I would love to see him at the Euros, but unfortunately we will not this year, and I'm not surprised. I expected it. I saw it coming, and it's good on him for making the smart decision and staying out of the Euros. We went from a 39-year-old in Zlatan to a 29-year-old in Van Dijk to now a teenager who is 18 years old in Ansu Fati, who will not be playing in the Euros for an injury reason. It won't be a no call-up. It is obviously an injury. He's had 4 games for Spain. He's played unbelievable for Barca and for Spain before his injury. What do you think? Do you think Spain's going to really miss him? Think they still got a chance at winning the Euros?
I don't think it's necessarily a massive loss for them, for their team this year. I just think it's really unfortunate for them moving forward that Fati won't have that bit of experience with the game time, the experience of being with the team, and just competing at that high level in such a high-intensity tournament. As much as Ansu Fati is a quality player, I don't think he necessarily has that type of effect on the Spanish side yet. And it's a scenario where they'd lose him for the tournament and it drastically changes their odds in the tournament. It's definitely a loss, but it's not an irreplaceable one by any stretch. Now, we might be saying it very differently if this is the Euros 4 years down the line and Ansu Fati isn't in it. That's a whole other story. But it's unfortunate that he's not going to get the experience. I think that experience would have been very valuable for him as such a young kid coming in and getting that valuable playing time in a Euros competition. But I think Spain still has to be considered a very strong squad going into this Euros competition. And I don't think not having Ansu Fati on the roster is a big detriment.
Yeah, I can agree with you more. He's obviously still 18. I think what you said there about experience, I think that's probably the most key thing here. I think the Euros would have been huge for him, especially next year. We got the World Cup coming up in Qatar. I think Spain's going to look to take him, obviously. But the Euros would have been huge for him, getting a little bit of game time, some experience, being with the team, being with the players, learning to set up the system. Obviously, the manager could change in a year's time, knowing Spain, they do that quite often. But still, that would have been huge for him with experience at that age. 18-year-old getting Euros under his belt, hopefully a goal. But unfortunately, that won't be happening. And hopefully, he can heal up and get ready for the next season with Barcelona. We have two more players we want to talk about here. One is for the French national team in Ferland Mendy, who plays left back for Real Madrid. He will be out for injury. He's 25 years old. He has only played in 7 games for France in his career. France has a lot of options at left back. Do you think this is really hurting them, or do you think it's just whatever for France?
I mean, I think he was definitely the favorite, at least in my opinion, to be the starting left back for this French squad, but it's not like they don't have a plethora of options in that back line. Lucas Hernandez can play there. Benjamin Mendy can play there. We've seen multiple guys play there over the years in different competitions for France. I'm sure they would have loved to have Ferland Mendy, but I don't think they're necessarily overly stressed about not having him. They have many other guys they could plug over there and do just fine. I think they have enough talent on this roster and enough defensive support in the midfield and in their center backs that they're going to be just fine with whoever they put over there at left back, out of Lucas Hernandez or Benjamin Mendy.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Benjamin Mendy, Lucas Hernandez, even Benjamin Pavard has been known to play there for France or for Bayern Munich. And you're really not going to lose him too much. You're losing his defensive capabilities too much because both Hernandez and Benjamin Mendy are not known for the defensive capabilities, while Ferland Mendy is. All you're really losing is defensive capabilities, but it's not that big of a loss, really. I think they'll survive, and I think they'll motor on right through and maybe make the final. More than likely will. They're such a big dominant force in Europe. The last player we feature on this list is back in Holland, Sven Botman. He has played 35 games for Lost Lille this season. He's only 21, and he's only had 5 games for the U21 squad. He is not left for injury. It is called a no call-up. The Dutch national team manager, has decided not to call him up in Frank de Boer. He has decided to call up the likes of Nathan Ake and De Vrij, and obviously they got other center-back options. Do you understand why they're leaving Sven Botman back? Because it baffles me why he's not coming.
It really doesn't make sense to me either. As far as potential center backs that are put on the preliminary roster, this roster still has to be cut by 10, but they have Veltman, Nathan Ake, De Vrij, Daley Blind, Thijs de Ligt, and St. Just of Mainz. Now, obviously, there's some good center back options here. It's not like there's an absolute bum that's just sitting over here and Botman's hanging out back home and it's like, hey, like, you guys are bums. But with that being said, Botman's obviously had a very good season. He stepped in very well within Gabriel leaving to Arsenal and stepped into that role perfectly. It looks like just as good, if not better, of a center back than Gabriel was, and looks to be the next promising center back coming out of Lost Lille. But he's been so good, and his youth, he has that potential to just continue to develop. And as we mentioned with Ansu Fati, getting that experience at a major tournament at this young age, it just makes sense to have him on the roster. I know St. Just is a similar type of player, but if you had to tell me whether I had to take St. Just or if I had to take Botman, I'd be taking Botman in a heartbeat. You could also argue, although Daley Blind's leadership and experience is very valuable, that you could put someone like Botman in over him on this roster. And even the likes of Nathan Ake, especially, who really hasn't played that much this season. I think 10 games in the Premier League and 15 appearances in total. There's definitely some guys who can make an argument that he should be in over on this team. But yet he's just not there, and I don't quite understand why. He seems like a vital piece for this team, especially with Virgil Van Dijk, as we mentioned, being out for injury for the tournament. I don't quite understand this decision.
Yeah, it really makes no sense. Obviously, Botman hasn't had first-team appearances or first-team call-ups yet, but to think he's played 35 games for a team that's going to win league over the likes of PSG, which is really saying a lot more than a guy, Nathan Ake, who's played 13 appearances for Manchester City in the Premier League. And obviously the Dutch national team, we've talked about, me and yourself both, and how they made some very interesting player choices in their preliminary rosters with their goalkeepers. We'll hint at that next week. But yeah, it's very shocking why they're not taking 21-year-old Sven Botman. I think he's the perfect replacement for Van Dijk. Right beside De Ligt, you have both young talent and a lot of experience and elite winning mentality there between both of them. But it makes absolutely no sense what the Dutch are doing, and hopefully they can figure it out and maybe take Sven Botman. But Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. That'll wrap up our show. Next week, we'll be back to wrap up the end of the Premier League and give our Premier League team of the seasons. It'll be very interesting to see who we put in our midfields specifically, because there's a lot of choices there. But thank you, everyone, for watching last week and this week, and we'll see you next week. See you, everyone.